Hello, everyone. Welcome to CoffeeBreak YXE. I'm your host, Ian Roach. Thanks for watching. Today is Tuesday, November 16, 2021. Almost to the 2021 before 16. November 16, Tuesday. That's what you need to know. Our guest this morning is Jeff Walters, the new leader of the Saskatchewan Liberal Party. We're going to chat with him about his vision for the party. But before we introduce him, a reminder, if you have any questions for Mr. Walters, please feel free to ask them in the comments on whatever platform that you're watching on. Also, if you've not already done so, please like or subscribe to our various social media channels. It really helps us a lot. Before we bring Mr. Walters in for our conversation, a reminder, if you're in Saskatoon and area, and actually probably a lot of the province now, that there is winter conditions that are imminent. In fact, Environment Canada, or whatever they call it now, has issued a winter storm warning about 40 minutes ago, expecting heavy band of snow with wind. Approximately 15 to 30 centimeters snow can be expected, maybe a little less in Saskatoon, but they certainly expect with the wind, with gusts nearly 90 kilometers an hour, that conditions will deteriorate over the course of the day. So if you're out and about in Saskatoon and a large swath of the province, north and south of Saskatoon, please take care. They also advise that if you can, postpone any unessential travel until conditions improve, and they are expected to start improving sometime tomorrow. So that's your weather, and you're in the know here at CoffeeBreak YXE. That brings us to our guest. There is a leadership convention. Jeff Walters is now the leader of the Saskatchewan Liberal Party, and we bring him on. We want to hear what Mr. Walters has to say about his party and their future. Jeff, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Ian. I appreciate that.
First question, how are you today?
Doing very well. I'm here in Regina. It's a tad windy. We had rain all night. Luckily, it hasn't frozen over yet. We haven't got to that point, though I'm sure it'll come soon. But
any weather warnings for you that far south?
Wind warning, oddly enough. Strong winds. But again, it's Regina. It's the south. There's going to be strong winds. But we'll see what happens with that. Nothing catastrophic yet. Not as much as you guys up in Saskatoon, that's for sure.
Gotcha. Let's get into it. Last time we had you on the show, you were talking about a leadership process for selecting a new leader. That was back in the spring. Now it's the fall in November, and you're the leader of the party. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. A lot of people did a lot of hard work to have that happen. And I appreciate what everybody's done to help us and to help me specifically to get to this point. So again, it's not me. I'm just the face. There's a lot of people in the background that put in the hard work to have this happen.
And fair enough, any grassroots party probably grows that way. So let's go back to the morning after you become leader, and it's less than 24 hours, and you wake up, and it's like, where do I start? Where are you going to start? What's your first priority?
Our priorities are already actually set, and you're not that far off. The process actually worked. We really did wake up the next morning and took stock of what we had. We essentially started from scratch, looking at finances, looking at the infrastructure, what's there, looking at what the party actually has policy-wise, and even just the brand logo itself. And we set up a list of priorities. We created what we're calling a phase of reorganization and recalibration, where we're going to essentially have several streams going that are going to try and modernize those things I just mentioned. It's a lot of hard work, but it's going to be paying off very soon. This is going to be capped in sometime in March when we have our policy convention. We haven't determined the actual site for that yet, but it will be a face-to-face site, and that will be capping this period of reorganization. Soon after this policy convention, in a few weeks after that, we will actually be launching formally our brand new party with brand new policy platform, brand new logos, etc., in a marketing campaign. So it's a bit of essentially a recalibration, as I mentioned, a reorganization for the next few months, and it has to be done.
And part of this reorganization, of course, political parties around the world run on money. How are things in that department? Are you able to have the resources to do this rebranding?
We do, actually. Oddly enough, one of the good things about being a brand name is that it has a history, and that history never really kind of goes away. Whatever you think of the idea of Saskatchewan Liberal, we've been around since the beginning. And so we've never really come to a point where we've been bankrupt or broke. where our infrastructure has completely disappeared. There is a certain amount of positivity with regard to having a party that's been around for a long period of time. So we do have resources banked. We do have infrastructure that's there. Our job going forward, though, is to expand that infrastructure, to break it out into new and inventive ways. So we're not just relying on the past all the time to try and bail us out. Really, it really is all about renewal. And funding-wise, that's where it happens. And at the end of the day, any type of organization such as ours, we're not here to make money. We're here to accrue money to be able to do what we need to do as a party. And so it really is almost like a snowball effect or self-sufficient in a certain way that once money starts being spent, let's say, for example, for a marketing campaign, the expectation, of course, is that as it goes forward, it will help, of course, in the long run, kickstart more fundraising and more contributions. And in that way, it kind of is a cyclical thing. So at the end of the day, we do have resources to be able to do what we need to do in the interim. And going forward, it's the hope and expectation that we keep expanding.
You mentioned you have a policy convention coming up. Did you say March?
Preferably March. We haven't actually nailed down the date yet, but I could say with a fair degree of confidence, the month of March is that month. And so it will be happening. But once we get specifics, of course, we're going to, have a press release and publicize it. But it will be sometime in March.
In spite of that, you still have some policies. I suspect a lot of these policies that you have on your website are going to survive the convention and be built upon. We can get into specifics after that, but in terms of the political spectrum, where do you envision the Liberal Party being positioned compared to the NDP or the Sask Party, the two main parties that have seats in the ledge?
And it's one of those things we actually talked about before. And I like to use the term, and this might get me in trouble, but I'm part of what's called the radical center. I am a centrist to the core. And at the end of the day, we are the pragmatists and we're the big tent party. So where we sit is essentially going with the philosophy of whatever is the best idea, regardless of where ideologically it's emanated from. If it helps the majority of the people in Saskatchewan, prospectively can, it is something we need to pursue. And so at the end of the day, we are the party that brings groups together to try and find consensus rather than dictating through a rigid ideology what our policies should be. We are the party that really is all about trying our best to help the greatest number of people in Saskatchewan possible. If that means picking a policy or backing a policy that doesn't necessarily align specifically to us, that's fine, because we are here to help people, not here to dictate what people should be doing or what we think they deserve based upon ideology.
Interesting. Perhaps we'll unpack that a bit as we get into talk about particular, policies in general. But if I can, 2024 is the next election, allegedly, but 3 years. Yeah, but 3 years. Are you going to try and run a full slate of candidates in 2024, or what's the plan right now?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because prior to myself being leader and chief official agent, I was part of this, the chair of the strategy and planning committee. And what we did early last year was create a strategic plan, a long-term one, much like a corporation would do, right? Strategic planning is quite normal for entities to do. And our vision that we came out with was a long-term plan of around 80 years, so 2 election cycles. And so we don't want to break the bank in the first 4, right? We want to kind of keep the course and stay the course. Now, what this means is we're not wedded to the idea that somehow we need to blanket the province in places if we know that certain places in the province is not conducive at all to our needs, or we can give the people, voting people, any type of veracity. And so we're not going to be, using massive amounts of paper candidates or condescendingly putting people in places, right, parachuting them in places where they don't even live. It's annoying to the voter, and 2, it's not really respecting the voter as well. And so what we have done and what we are doing in this reorganization phase is that we are in the process of researching and isolating certain constituencies which we want to target as what we think our base is. And those are 15. And we start from our base of 15. And once our marketing campaign starts kicking in after March, after our policy platform, we will see where that expands to and how it plays with other constituencies. And so we grow from there. So rather than playing this whole thing of, well, we have everybody in all 61 vote for us, even though the vast majority of them don't even live there or just there on paper, we're going to do it the right way and actually build something. And so that's why it might take 8 years. Going back to 2024, even if we only have 20 to 25 candidates, if they are solid candidates with a solid infrastructure, with a platform, and an idea that is something that the voters of those particular constituencies locally that we know are attuned with, we're good with that. It's a good place with which to start. Now, that doesn't mean at the end of the day we don't want people in all 61. If we get there in 2024, that's terrific, but we're not going to force it. But it doesn't help anybody. And again, it insults the voter. 2028, on the other hand, that's the goal, of course, to have all 61 with the infrastructure to back it.
So if I'm just doing the math in my head, mathematically, the numbers you're floating, there would not be enough to form government.
Well, we're pragmatists and realists. Yeah. For the most part, there's little chance that a party that went from 3 candidates in 2020 would somehow 4 years later form government. So we need to be realistic. But that doesn't mean things can't change as circumstances dictate. I mean, obviously, if something happens within the public that changes our strategic plan to a certain way or contradicts it, of course we're adaptable enough. It's a living document, so we can adjust along the way. But pragmatically, we have to be realistic in what we can accomplish based upon what we have now. And so we might not perhaps be able to form government necessarily, but having a few representatives even in there is a major change politically. You have to remember, we've been a system for the past, 20 years, which has been essentially a 2-party binary system. And that's part of the apathy that the voters are having right now, right? That 48% that no longer feel attached to either one of the 2 parties. They're looking for a third party. And that's not saying they're looking for a third party to wipe the slate clean and take everything over, but they want to have at least another option that they can have comfortably to be able to choose from. And that's really where we're coming from. We want to give those people, especially, and these are the people that are in the center where we are, we want to give those people that option once again that they haven't had in quite some time, to be able to exercise their vote in a way that's meaningful for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my head, I'm tossing around 2 questions. I'm going to ask this one. It's the 30-second elevator pitch. So if I'm a potential voter and we hop in the elevator, let's say ground floor, and we're going, I'll give you a bit more time, going up to the 21st floor. Sell me on your party and get my vote. Go.
Okay. We are the party of renewal. We are the party of the future. We are separate from what your options have been over the course of the past 10, 15 years in several cycles. We are the party that are looking for modernization. We are essentially the party that you can join and actually have a say in how that modernization looks. We are the party at the end of the day that will give you that third option, that will make you feel that you are exercising your right to vote the way you want to, not the way you think you have to. Essentially, we are the party of renewal and the party that's going to bring this province into the 21st century.
That's pretty good. I think we're on the 19th floor, so you had a bit of time left over. So thank you
sorry. Should I keep going there?
No, it's okay. It's okay. So before we get to actual policy, talk about specific policies that is on your website, taking a look, and there's some interesting things there. I'm going to ask the question, maybe I'll follow up a bit more. Is it hard being Liberal in Saskatchewan right now?
To answer your question, absolutely. And it's kind of, it's by design for the most part. As I mentioned this before when I was on your show, the Saskatchewan Liberal Party has not, in all honesty, done a good job in promoting itself. It's not done a good job in establishing its own narrative. And so what happens is, those few people who think that we're still around tend to lump us in with the federal Liberals and not understand that we're a separate entity. And it's not the voters, it's not the public's fault that this thought process is there, because they're told that by other parties who obviously don't want us to succeed. It's our fault as a party for not reaching out to those voters specifically and letting them know what we are about. It's a failure of communication on our part. And that's exactly the thing that we're going to change. So that is really our big focus, especially after this reorganization phase, is to essentially reclaim the narrative and show people what we're about. The party hasn't done this probably since, and somebody's going to get angry for this, but probably since the 2016 election. We've kind of went dormant, and that's on us, right? Our job as a public entity is to let the public know what we're about, right? That is our job. And so that's one of the things that we are going to do quite intensively in the very near future.
Let's get into it. Let's talk about specific policy ideas. One that caught my eye, and I think it's something that was happening for a while and has kind of rolled back, is I think it's under, where would I find it? Be under your building a strong and diversified economy section, talking about being able to add power to the power grid.
Yes, that's actually quite a simple thing, and it's not something that's science fiction or fantasy by any stretch of the imagination. We're at a situation here, and I already mentioned this, that Saskatchewan of itself, we tend to have our economy and our politics still kind of stuck in the 20th century, where we only have a couple industries that dominate with regard to our economics, and our politics are dominated by a left-wing government and a right-wing government. We really haven't had a whole lot of modernization. And if you're the party in power, you kind of don't want that either, because that's your power base. And so going back to your question, is that there are many things that are already being done that can actually be beneficial for us to bring us into the 21st century. And part of that is expanding power bases, literally power, by using renewables. And I know this is beating a dead horse, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of lessons that can be learned based upon renewable sources that we can actually change the nature of our power grid. And that's not saying scrapping SAS power, firing a bunch of people, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's just what people say when they don't want change. But we can modernize, and there are templates out there to be able to do so. And Saskatchewan's in a unique position to be able to do so by virtue of our topography and our geography, that we can really take advantage of that to bring ourselves into a 21st century power grid. It's easy enough, which translates very well to bringing in a whole different sector into our economy, where we can diversify our economy simply by doing some easy steps that in the future are the ones that we're going to be having to do anyway. We just need to take the first couple steps.
Okay, very good. Just keep moving on here. One that struck my interest, and I spend a lot of time on Twitter following politics here in Saskatchewan, banning corporate and union political donations and capping personal donations. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's kind of essential. And again, it's the situation where the status quo, because they benefit from it, they're obviously, there's not going to be change. How we change, campaign finance reform, election finance reform, political donations, is the government essentially has to approve it. They have to ask for it, and they have to be the ones to change it. If you're the government in power the past 20 years, why would you want to change something when you get billions of dollars based upon how it is? And so you're not probably the best avenue to be able to have this happen. But we as a party, we already do not accept corporate and union donations. It's actually in our constitution, precisely because it tends to have undue influence on policy. And that's something that we don't want. All right, we can't claim to be the party that wants to help the greatest number of people if we allow certain interests to take over the policy regime. That's not saying corporations and unions can't help us with our policies. That's simply saying there will be one of many groups to find consensus with, not the only group. And so banning corporate and union donations is not the worst thing in the world necessarily. And it's an easy sell for people who feel that they're being buried, that can only afford maybe 20, 25 bucks to support a political candidate, or maybe $10 a month, who would feel probably like they're doing a greater good if they weren't being buried by outside sources. And so we've always been like that. Putting caps on individual donations, it's not the worst idea in the world either. We have some federally. Provincially,
what's the federal cap? It's 24-ish, 2,500?
2,800 maybe? I'm not quite sure. Again, somebody's probably going to yell at us for that, but it is what it is. But we are called the Wild West here when it comes to campaign finance, and for good reason, because there are no real rules. And some of the rules we have go back to prohibition in the 1920s. I would hazard to guess that our society's perhaps changed a bit since then. And so at the end of the day, it's worth a look, and it's worth putting some sanity back in there. And I'm not just saying that based upon because I'm a party on the outside looking in. I'm saying for the benefit for everybody, even if I wasn't a politician, that this would be the smart move to actually try and do. And it's kind of, I guess it's frustrating that people who can do something choose not to. And it's a choice, choose not to. And then it just creates questions and frustrations and really poisons our politics more than it already is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you currently cap it? I think your policy is 3,000, somewhere the 3,000 mark. Do you cap personal donations at 3,000? Is that just an idea that would happen in a future law?
It's an idea, and that's something that probably will change with our policy convention, right? It's one of many ideas. The entire point is that there should be a cap in place, and that's not asking too much because, again, almost every other jurisdiction has a cap. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel or anything like that. I mean, that's pretty standard fare. So whatever that actual hard number will be after the policy convention will be, but $200, plus or minus, probably won't change much in the grand scheme of things on that number.
Another policy, you talk about changing the income tax brackets. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting thing, and that itself will be brought into the policy platform or policy convention as well. The idea, of course, is to raise the brackets. And so the numbers have been thrown around from certain ideas as raising up to 30,000 being tax-free or non-taxable. That number, of course, can be adjusted, but the entire point is to put more money in the pockets of the average person. Now, we can say, well, there already are adjustments made at different levels or whatnot, that one might do that. But at the end of the day, for people, let's say on poverty line-ish or people making under $30,000 to pay tax or income tax seems like a burden that isn't really necessary. And that's something that we can actually help relieve. So instead of playing this game of them paying the tax and getting a rebate back at the end, meanwhile, they don't have that money most of the year. It's playing a lot of games and using a lot of bureaucracy, which doesn't really have to be there. And so we can have better and more clever ways of being able to do this much more efficiently.
Just for clarity, I think you mentioned it, lowering the tax brackets for low income individuals. Are we talking about that? Or are we talking about a trickle down economics kind of theory where we're lowering taxes for the rich?
Well, I mean, the trickle down, we're already kind of in that phase right now. And so, I mean, we can see what's and there's no reason why we can't balance it out. It's not like somehow a give or take that, if it's taken from them, then that person, it's everybody can benefit in a certain way, right? It's just finding that sweet spot, right? That middle spot that can appease everybody. And, it's always interesting that someone for myself who actually is in a higher tax bracket, when something happens with the government and I get a little extra, and I'm thinking, well, that's great, but one of my students can't afford to feed her family. Why? To me, that doesn't make sense necessarily. I mean, I'm grateful for the tax, extra tax break, but I don't need it, right? My student needs it, who literally cannot feed her family day in, day out. And that's really where the focus needs to be. So I'm not saying that somehow we add extra taxes to everybody and make sure the rich fly away and all that kind of stuff, but there are common sense boundaries that we can find that can help the greatest number of people. Absolutely.
And this is a good segue into eliminating the provincial sales tax on insurance.
That's it. And this one makes the most sense. I mean, it's so difficult to sell to, make people buy insurance and then tax them for it. I mean, how do you do that with a straight face? It's kind of like, you have your certain insurance that you need to have legally, and we will tax you on it. It doesn't need to be there. And my philosophy is always, if something is mandatory, you don't double down and making it extra painful for somebody to have to do it. And so it's, to me, a common sense thing. And I, for a while, was a business consultant for SGI Canada. So I saw this firsthand of how this actually works. And it's an easy move. Right? And it isn't a whole lot of money necessarily for general revenue, but it could mean something for the average person too, that feels aggrieved that they'll have to pay tax on something that they have to actually buy. I mean, there's better ways of doing this, better ways for people to get money in their pockets rather than punishing people for something that they have to do.
More money in pockets. You're giving me the perfect segues, Jeff. I appreciate it. Reduce interest on student debt.
Yeah, this is something I see. I'm a lecturer, of course, at the University of Regina for the Department of Sociology, and I do see this a lot. And, part of our society necessitates now higher education for, a good chunk of jobs. If somebody wants a career, that's one of the means in which they can do it. I mean, there's obviously other avenues, but it's increasingly more important for, younger people to get degrees now. And one of the ways in which they have to do that, of course, is having to pay for tuition or whatnot. And tuition, of course, goes up every year because our government, over the course of the past several cycles, have actually been a little remiss in how much they actually give the public institutions to survive. And so tuition constantly goes up almost every year to the detriment of students, which goes way above inflation rates. And so they are forced to accumulate debt. And to walk out, let's say, with a BA with $40,000, $50,000 in debt, it limits your choices on what you can do with that particular degree, because you have to start making money immediately in order to start paying off this debt. And so it's a vicious cycle that the degree is necessary, but the punishments for getting that degree actually limits your career choices. And so interest on student loan debt is a major issue for many people, right? And the interest on it, because it is government controlled now, we can control how much we charge for interest for the most part. And it is really remiss not to charge the lowest rate possible. There's no reason why not to Again, the government should not be in it for making money off the backs of people for general revenue. The government here is to help people. And so to better help people who are literally sacrificing their economic, the present economic conditions for their future, the least we can do is make it as close to revenue neutral as possible. Right? We're helping them out to get the degree so they can help us with our economy. Obviously, it helps us that way. It helps them to be productive members of our society. And at the end of the day, if we can do that with less pain for them, why wouldn't we? It just makes no actual sense that we would actually punish people for doing the right thing.
Okay. Lots of other points we can do, but I do have to bring up one more, because if I don't, a lot of my friends and colleagues, because the industry I used to be involved with, a lot more will come at me. But reinstate the film and video tax credit. I know a lot of my circle of friends would say, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's another one of those things that just kind of disappeared, and there's no actual logic behind it. It just kind of happened, right? Mm-hmm. And you'd be really hard pressed to find even people in government to try and explain that very well. That's just kind of how it is. And it doesn't actually, we did have a burgeoning industry. We had a bustling industry with that tax credit, which was the impetus for it. And of course, Corner Gas of all, the sitcom that's so famous, they were helped along with the tax credit as well. And so it does its job for the most part in helping an industry. And to take that away essentially bottomed out that industry before it got a chance to actually really expand to where it could be, completely self-sufficient on its own. It's really remiss. And the argument, of course, is that, well, if an industry can't survive with a tax credit, then maybe, in a free market system, it shouldn't be there. Well, do we apply the same logic to oil companies or whatnot when we give them tax breaks or whatnot? Not saying oil companies are evil or the tax credits they get are bad, but it's just making a comparison, right? It's a choice by the government to pick sides in an economy where it didn't actually need to pick sides from. And so the easiest move in the world is simply just to reinstate it. That being said, I personally feel that it can be expanded. It can actually be part of our diversification of our economy based on a couple of choices we can make. I mean, look at this.
That's happened in Alberta recently. Didn't they just expand their tax credit?
Which one, sorry?
Alberta?
Yes, absolutely. Because as we peeled ours back, other provinces were actually enhancing theirs. So we kind of fell really behind the eight ball with that, even worse than perhaps we could have. And I always use the state of Georgia as an example, right? The state of Georgia decided one day they sat down, the government said, we're going to have our own film industry here. And they provided the economic means possible to get it started. And of course, if you watch shows, let's say The Walking Dead or whatever, there's a Georgia peach at the end, right? That shows that it's from the state of Georgia. And I'm thinking, if shows like that can have the Georgia peach, why can't we have the prairie lily on one? It just takes some steps that we can actually do to help expand a burgeoning industry that actually we've already seen can succeed here. And if we help it along, the payoff down the road is legion. It's exponential. So again, it's part of that short-sightedness, that 20th century economy idea or thought process that our current government tends to have, right? They pick winners and losers, and they pick the winners based upon what has already been, right? We've milked that as much as we can. And at the end of the day, diversification is where it's at, because if one of those industries fails, you see what happens to our economy. It doesn't have to be that way.
Governments need money to do things. And are you concerned about the revenue side of the equation? Because we're talking about reducing revenue in the case of, I guess, removing PST from insurance and reducing interest and tax credits, or there'll be a hit in the bottom line. Are you concerned about the revenue side of the equation?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned trickle down. There's also something called trickle up, right? When you think about it for a second. A trickle down, of course, is that if you eliminate taxes and a lot of regulations or whatnot to the top side, that they will end up spending more money, but the wealth of which will trickle down to those who are not part of the elite or part of that particular group. But trickle up kind of works the same way. That if you eliminate certain things, what is people going to do with their money? If I'm making $30,000-$40,000 a year, and I say, well, let's say $300 or $400 based upon the tax revenue that we've been talking about, where am I going to spend that money? Right? Am I just going to put it in my mattress? Well, of course not, because I have to pay for diapers for my child, or I have to put gas in my car, or maybe that's the good time to renovate my home because I need it because the pipes are getting old, or whatever the case may be. They'll be plowing that back into the economy, which only helps us in the long run. So it really is just, the reverse of trickle down in its own way. And that's where the argument really should stand. But if it's good enough for the top down, it could be easy enough for the bottom up. It's the same revenue source, just in a different place in society.
Interesting. We're running out of time, but if I were to summarize, I think for 2024, you're asking the Saskatchewan people to give you consideration to be some sort of opposition in the legislature. And then
we're asking for the chance to prove ourselves, right? You don't have to buy all in if you're skeptical, but give us a shot. Allow us to show you what we can do, right? Allow us to prove ourselves to you. Allow us to reintroduce ourselves, what we're about now, and what we can do for you, and make that decision, right? It's kind of like when you're shopping for a home, you don't normally get to buy the first home you see, right? I mean, you can. Oddly enough, I did, but generally speaking, it doesn't work that way, right? You tend to shop around, and you try to see what your options are. Give us that chance. You don't have to go all in, as a big gamble and have us form government and then be disappointed after. Give us a chance to prove ourselves in the ring. And if you are satisfied with what you see, join us and come with us and be with us in the future for a party that really is about the future. It's about the renewal of this province to bring us to where we should be in the 21st century.
Brings us to 2028. And I think, if I'm hearing you correctly, you may be asking the people of Saskatchewan to consider allowing the Saskatchewan Liberal Party to form government. So kind of a three-part question maybe, is, are you committed as leader to be around until 2028? Do you think you can assemble a team to win? And do you think you can assemble a team to govern?
Yeah, as leader, I am. And again, I would never have offered to put my name in if I wasn't in it for the long run. This is not, of course, some kind of side project or anything like that. Based upon my background with the party and strategic planning and stuff, I knew what the work was stepping in. And that's something that's I'm in for 2028 if the party wants to have me around. I mean, of course, there's mechanisms that if they feel I'm doing a poor job, they can get rid of me. Mm-hmm. But I'm not happy, especially with the party's history of having a leader just for a few years and then kicking the can to somebody else. There's lack of stability that way. It's like in hockey. If the team keeps changing the coach, then the team suffers and the team is not as productive as it could be. And so we need some kind of stability at the top, and that's what I hope to bring. Can I build a team off that? Absolutely. There are so many people out there that are looking for a party to jump in, perhaps for the first time, a young professional or somebody who, say, owns their own auto mechanic place that are just had enough and just want to join something but don't see options. There are so many people out there that are looking for not just inspiration, but a means for which they can actively participate in a meaningful way. And that's what we want to bring. And so forming government, 2024 would be terrific, but 2028, that's really our goal. Absolutely. That's the thing, of course, that we take seriously. And that's what the reorganization is about. We want to do this the right way, not the easy way. And so we're all about building. We're all about restructuring. We're all about taking the best ideas and implementing them. The policy convention is another example. We want all ideas possible, and we'll show ways which people can submit their ideas or even come face-to-face and do it. We want that engagement because at the end of the day, again, we are here for people. People aren't here for us. And we really want to help the greatest number of people possible. That's our goal, right? And You don't have to like how I talk. If I talk like a professor or whatever, you don't have to like how I look. But if you like my ideas, give us the chance. Right? Allow us that platform of opportunity to show you what we can do.
And even better, if people want to meet you, any opportunities for the people of Saskatoon? Here's a good segue. I'm just shoveling it right to you, pushing it right into your lap. Any chance that prospective voters or party members could meet you anytime soon in Saskatoon?
Yep, absolutely. Saskatoon, as you know, I'm actually from Saskatoon. We actually have our first, what we call Meet Jeff. It's really kind of a meet and greet for us to actually engage the public with something the party hasn't done in quite some time. The first one is in Saskatoon on Saturday, November 20th from 1 to 3 at Christchurch Anglican. You do have to RSVP, though. And the reason for that, of course, is COVID restrictions. We absolutely do not want a scenario where we have an outbreak just simply because we have people just wandering around. So it is RSVP only. That being said, though, if you don't RSVP, but you still want to come meet me, you can email me. You can find it on our website, and I can meet you after, let's say outside or something like that. I'd be happy to talk with you and converse. I mean, that's what I'm all about. We have this one in Saskatoon. We have 3 others planned. One in Moose Jaw, one in Battleford, and then capping out the year in Regina. And we're in the offering for several more starting up next year. The point, of course, is being meeting the public, right? That first step as a public entity, meeting a public. And that's what we're all about. We want to hear from you.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, thank you so much. You've given us a lot of time today, a lot to think about. Wish you and your party all the best for the future. And as things progress, maybe around getting ready for your the policy convention, that we'll chat a bit more then.
Absolutely. Anytime you want me, I'm available. Thank you, Ian. I really do appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you so much. We'll see you again.
Okay. Thank you.
Now. That's it for CoffeeBreak YXE today. A couple of reminders. Reminder that there is a winter storm warning in effect for the city of Saskatoon. They issued that around 9:20 this morning. 15 to 30 centimeters of snow. Local higher amounts being possible. However, they are saying later on in the release that there could be a situation where in the city that we may get a bit less snow than that, but there is a possibility of wind gusts up to 90 kilometers an hour. So if you have to be out and about, please stay safe out there. If you can, they're asking that people postpone non-essential travel until conditions improve. Thank you again for watching. If you want to support us, feel free to go over to noyxe.com/shop. And there you can find some great t-shirt swag you could buy, and we get a bit of money for that. If you have a news tip, or you have a media release, or you want to be part of the show, or you have a pitch for a new show, please reach out to us at news@noyxe.com. The other one you can use is intheknow@noyxe.com. That's it. Later on today, what do we have coming up? If I can find those, I can't find them. I'll try and do it by memory. Let's Chat, usually on 11. It's every other week. It's not on today. Nezrin will be back next Tuesday at 11 a.m. And that's our show. That's in Arabic. Tonight, new time, YXE Sports Podcast with Matt Morrison is on at 6 p.m. tonight. Right after that, not right after, but at 7 p.m. is our game show, In Focus YXE. A lot of fun. We show you a blurry photo. Over time, it becomes less blurry, and if you think you can figure out where it is in Saskatoon, you can guess for your opportunity to win a prize. And then at 8 p.m. we have, and I don't have it here, we have our show Green Room YXE with Leslie Stanwick and Johnny Sinclair. We compacted all our shows onto Tuesday, so we're hopefully making Tuesday into a super duper power day where there's lots of things happening. I'll be back next Tuesday at 10 a.m. here with CoffeeBreak YXE. Winter storm warning. Please be safe out there. Thanks for watching.